Animals. My name is Shannon. I'm an animal intuitive and sensitive and a Reiki practitioner at animallovelanguages.com. This is my ever-present feathered sidekick, my 23-year-old soul bird, Pearl Cuts. He never misses an episode. Today we have a very special guest. For those of you who are watching the vlogcast version on YouTube, my young lady, my 7.5-year-old, almost 8-year-old red-footed tortoise Malty is joining us because we are having a little cold spurt right now. And so she's indoors just foraging around the new space. So I just wanted to allow her to make a surprise guest appearance. And of course, we have a wonderful special guest with us today, Miss Sage Lewis from Prescott, Arizona. Sage Lewis is with Dancing Porcupine. So delighted to have you with us this morning, Sage. Or those of you who are listening, of course, this is pre-recorded, so you may be listening in the evening or at your lunch hour or whatever works for you. Of course, just a reminder, we are on YouTube. We are also on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Apple, all those great places for those of you who prefer podcast version. Let's Talk to Animals is really all about de-wooing, if you will, the art of interspecies communication, tuning in, retuning in, if you will, scrolling through your operating system, finding the program that says interspecies language skills, opening it, downloading it, installing it, and starting to remember that we are all connected, that we can speak to anything and everything and everyone and all the other beings that we share this world with. It's not woo. It's not new age. It's not off the grid. It's something that we are all born with the innate ability to do. And so many of us are remembering this. We're waking back up. We're realizing that our pets are trying to communicate with us, that our planet is trying to communicate with us. And these beings need us to remember how to hear them. And so this podcast is all about inviting seasoned, cutting edge, innovative, inspired animal communicators, energy workers, light workers, healers, to share their stories, how they got started. And so Sage is here this morning. We were just chatting before I pressed record about how your entire room filled up with rainbows of light before we met this morning. And while that would have made the video portion difficult to capture, what a beautiful message of hope for those of you who are listening, and encouragement to keep listening and keep exploring. So Sage, I always like to open up with just kind of sorry, he is just chatting this morning. I'd like to open up with an invitation to just share kind of how you came to this work. I know you have a couple of really special animal souls in your life who've guided you and continue to inspire you, but I'd love to just kind of rewind a little bit back to the beginning and hear how your journey unfolded and how you began with animal communication.
You know, I think, thank you for the question, because I love doing the interviews, because what I find is that more comes out than I thought was going to come out. And I go deeper than I thought I was going to go. So I thought I was going to start with, here's the moment I knew I was communicating with animals. But it began much sooner than that. When I was really little, really little, 4 years old, I lived on a farm in Wisconsin, and I was really connected with the animals. We had chickens, we had horses. I watched cows being born. We had dogs and cats, and I was very immersed with the animals. I remember riding our Old English sheepdog Josh around the yard, and I get on top of him at age 4, and I would hang on to him like a horse and ride him around, and he was so willing. And so I'm thinking about those early experiences I've had animals in my life as long as I can remember. And then there's that moment where we start to recognize that we know we can communicate on some level. And I really think riding the Old English sheepdog was probably my first entry point into communicating on some level with animals. I was also fascinated with Dr. Dolittle books when I was really little. And I remember my mom reading Dr. Dolittle to me, and I also have learned since that in 1967, the year that I was born, Dr. Dolittle was the top Broadway show in New York. So there must be
Wow.
something going on about the animals. And I just watched a documentary the other night called The Loneliest Whale in Search of 52. It was
Ugh.
really something. And hearing about in 1966, 67, how the whales, Greenpeace was fighting for the whales to come back. And I've had an affinity for whales ever since I was born. So did that happen consecutively with my birth around the time of the whales being nearly extinct and starting to come back in the late 60s? And Dr. Dolittle, the connection with Dr. Dolittle and our dog, and when I was 4 years old. So that was the stuff I didn't even remember I was going to talk about. But my entry point into actually knowing for sure that I was an animal communicator, I was around 2001, 2002, somewhere in there, and I was starting my Tellington T-Touch training, which is a method of touch and movement for animals, a method of dog training, and also working with people that helps with stress reduction and pain management and overall well-being. And I was beginning my studies with that work. And I was working at a shelter. I was volunteering at a shelter to do my studies with the T-Touch work. And I remember at the end of a session, I was the only one left at the shelter, and I was packing up and heading out. And I walked down this row of kennels, and I heard this voice. It was like boom, like it just kind of hit me in the back of the head. And I heard, "Help!" And I looked around, and there wasn't a person. There was nobody there. And I kind of freaked out, and I looked around, and there was a beagle in a cage next to me. And I did freak out. I was like, what is going on? So I went out to the car. I called my sister, because who can you tell that you're hearing voices besides a family
Yeah.
member that maybe understands, right? I called my sister. I said, I think I'm nuts. I just heard a voice. I don't know what to do. And she said, hold on, hold on. And my sister has had psychic abilities since she was little. She said, I think you were talking to the animals, and I think you're too open. You need to learn how to turn it on and turn it off. So I shut it off. I was like, that is too weird. I'm turning it off. Somewhere around, I'd say probably 5 years before that, I started reading Penelope Smith's Animal Talk. So that was probably my entry point. I started reading her books, and then I started reading, and then I was staring at my dogs like, talk to me. Come on, I can't hear you. Talk to me. And then this dog, finally 5 years later, I heard this animal speak the words help. And it was about a year and a half after that I really began to explore my connection with animal communication. I remember the moment I had the Penelope's Animal Talk. It was an animal communication series on how to communicate with animals. And at that time, it was on a cassette tape. And I started listening to it, and I started doing the exercises. And this was maybe 2002. And at that time, I was taking my dog to one of the T-Touch trainings in Cincinnati. And so I turned around in the car and I said, okay, tell me anything you want to tell me, which I would not recommend doing, because for 3.5 hours, I was like, blah, 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 blah. And I want this and this and this. It was like the floodgates opened. And it was incredible. So I'm one of those people that I have not done studying around animal communication. The animals came to me and essentially tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, we know you can hear us. We need you to be a conduit. And the same thing has happened with people, where I communicate with people who are, living, of course, as well as have crossed over. So it this kind of work, this work of telepathy, feeling across a distance, it spans everything from the plants to the trees, the stars, the whales, the animal, all of the other animals, and the people. So my guess is 20 years ago, with that dog in the shelter.
My guess is even earlier than that birth. I mean, it's so interesting that what really stands out to me as I listen to your story is how as a 4-year-old, you were so aware that Josh was willing. You received permission. You received a yes from him. And, just the affinity that you felt when you would hear stories and you would, it's that tap, tap, tap. I mean, we've all, I would say most of us anyway, have heard voices in our head, or voices that appear to not be in our head, and they're coming from around us, and we write it off. We think, oh, it's an echo. I mean, how many times do our little devices bleep? And you know we were talking about that too. We don't even know which one is talking to us, and they're all talking to each other, around us. And there's so many conversations going on. And so I like the analogy of, I'm very interested in that you say, well, my sister had psychic abilities from a young age. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think she was the only one. And I think you did too. I think your sister maybe came in with a little bit more of an awareness of how to tune the radio dial, of how to adjust the frequency, of how, I love what she said about how to turn it on and off, which is so important. I've had people, I've shared this story before on the podcast about when my father was in hospice, and one of the nurses that was caring for him told me, when my mother went around telling everyone I was an animal communicator because she was just so proud, and which is pretty cool. And one of the nurses said, oh, my daughter's been able to do that since she was a little girl. She just hears the animals. And I was like, that's fantastic. And then she said, yeah, I wouldn't want to have that. I'm glad I don't have that. And I said, well, I had to stop for a minute and think to myself, why would anyone not want that? And then I realized she thinks it just happens all the time, like it did with your dog in the car for 3.5 hours. She doesn't think that her daughter. And I said, look, your daughter's very young. She's very open. But the thing is, we learn how to manage. It's like we learn how to manage our channels, else we'd never be able to concentrate on anything, anywhere, with anyone. Because there's always communication going on. So she doesn't just walk around here. She won't just always walk around hearing them all the time unless she wants to. We can initiate a conversation. We can end a conversation. And so it's like people have that fear. And I have a feeling a lot of people that are listening to this podcast, I mean, there's millions and millions and millions of podcasts on the airwaves these days. Why tune into Let's Talk to Animals instead of, Get Fit in 5 days, or, how to make $1 million in a month, or whatever's going on, there's lots of great, or, my best friend's sister said, or whatever it is. It's like, so that's part of the reason that we have these conversations, is to debunk some of those myths and ease fears about what it will be like. So you shared a little bit with us about, what is it like for you talking with animals? But I would love if you're willing to talk a little bit more about this idea of what your sister introduced, how to open up, how to open a conversation, how to end a conversation. What does that feel like? How do you keep yourself from going nuts because everybody wants to talk to you?
Right. Right. I mean, it is kind of funny when I walk down a street and I see animals, they often will just turn and just look at me like, hey, I think you can hear me. Um, there was some movie with Mel Gibson around that where it was like everybody could hear what he was saying.
Oh,
But
I think that was women. I think he was kind of like not very nice to women, and so he got
okay.
like cursed with being able to hear women's. I don't remember, but yeah, it was some kind of payback movie, I think.
Um, yeah, so turning it on and turning it off. My introduction into, I would say my opening into working with the animals was shamanic work. And that came after a near-death out-of-body experience in 2000. So that actually was before this experience at the shelter with the dog, before my T-touch training. And it came on the heels of a car accident that
Oh wow.
was really, really profound, and it was life-changing. And what came from that car accident was starting to explore what else is out there. Because when you can see yourself from outside of yourself in that kind of a setting, and you actually realize, oh, I'm still here. Something just happened. I don't know what it was. I was 33 years old at the time, so I had no idea what I was experiencing. But what that experience, that car accident led me to was working with shamanic practitioners, originally through the Foundation of Shamanic Studies, and then moving on to working with a variety of teachers uh, that are versed in Hawaiian shamanism and also South American shamanism. But that entry point, the shamanic work, beating the drum, shaking the rattle, that puts us into that theta brainwave state, which allows us then to be at the same brainwave hertz that Mother Earth is always resonating at. So it's that theta brainwave. When we pound the drum, 7 beats a second, it puts us into theta, and that's where the animals are, is in that theta state. So my entry point was the shamanic work, doing the shamanic journey, perfecting the shamanic journey, exploring the journey, teaching the journey, and so on. And so I've been doing that for 22 years now. And at first, when I first began my animal communication and my intuitive work, I would drum for maybe 10 minutes before I began to talk with the animals, because that was my way of kind of pushing my brain into that theta state. And over time, it didn't take too many years, but it took years to train myself through both meditation and shamanic journeying, to train my brain to just flip a switch. And now that's how it is. I tend to be most often in an alpha theta state, so that relaxed awakened state, and then I can move very easily into that theta brainwave state. So when I'm communicating with a client, for example, dogs, cats, horses, whomever decides that they're needing to say something, when I have a session, as soon as the phone rings and it's their time for their call, that's when I open. And when the call's done, literally, when the phone call is done, then I shut things down. The only beings that I open myself up to 24/7 is my last dog, Java, who's in the afterlife, and our current dog, Reggae. They have carte blanche. They can check in anytime, however, whenever they need to. But other than that, it's very clear. When it's time for a session, I turn on. When it's the session's complete, I turn off. Otherwise, I would go nuts, because
Yeah.
they're talking all the time, and so are the plants and the trees and the stars and the moon. And we've got to have boundaries. This work is really about healthy boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about being of the highest service, and that means safeguarding our energy and our attention and our and seeking the same balance, is what I hear in your story of how you learned to begin and end a conversation. I mean, it can be so much fun at first to realize, oh my gosh, this is possible. Dr. Dolittle wasn't just a movie or a book series or whatever. However, it becomes, I mean, this is life and death. This is the weightiest matters of the waking world. It gets serious when you have a grieving human or a worried human involved, and you have an animal that has unmet needs, or trauma and things like that. And so, part of the path, it's like I did study briefly with in a formal classroom structure. That didn't end up working very well for me, because the way that she taught, I know my love, the way that she taught just wasn't the way that I learned very well. So my approach to teaching, as I actually start teaching classes myself, my approach to teaching is that we're not learning how to talk to animals. We're learning how to interact with ourselves to manage this ability to use it for the highest good, to manage our energy, and kind of sense where we're most needed. and I always mangle it because I don't remember exactly how she said it, but Mother Teresa, I believe, is credited for saying, um, there's something about the intersection of the world's deep hunger and your deep joy or deep need, and that's where I find different communicators are called to different communities of animals, to different methods of working with animals, to different how do you say, complementary services and offerings, such as I was drawn to Reiki. You have a shamanic background, and there's lots of music and different things, and you have a lot of experience working in hospice from what I read in your bio. And so, that's kind of this piece. First, we kind of wake up, we're like, hey, I think the animals are talking to me. This is kind of cool. It's kind of groovy. It's kind of weird. It's kind of freaking me out. Putting a little structure around it is the next step. Maybe studying, reading some books, like you read, a lot of Penelope Smith's books, and of course watching Dr. Dolittle is an instruction in itself, or reading the books, that kind of thing. Putting a little structure around how we work, and then the next step is kind of receiving that calling and kind of maybe choosing a focus, or where our heart beats strongest, I guess is the best way to say it. And then it's like, okay, well, we're delivering, we're helping, we're serving as intermediaries, we're serving as translators, if you will, between a human and, oh, sweetheart, oh, he's just going nuts, a human and their animal. But then, what I'm finding more and more is that the human doesn't want to just hear what their animal has to share, but also wants to know, okay, what do I do with this information? Well, how do I help my animal? How do I help my pet? Okay, he's hurting. Okay, she's bored. Okay, the dog, they don't get along with the dog next door, or the cat down the street, or whatever. So creating an experience and an ongoing shift in the dynamic of that relationship includes adding on to the recommendations, things to try. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you evolved. I guess that's a really long-winded question, but how you evolved as a communicator to really work with humans as well, because I know you work with people, and you work with pets, and you work with people and pets together. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. Sure, thank you. Well, my background before the shamanic work came in, before the car accident and the shamanic work, I was a school teacher. I taught elementary art for 10 years, and then I got a puppy, and that's what started me on the path of the Tellington Tea Touch work, which is the dog training work. So that was my beginning out of being teaching in the public schools into starting Dancing Porcupine, my business, and the Tea Touch work was my uh, beginning into the animal communication work. So the shamanic work started, then the Tea Touch work, then animal communication came from me learning how to quiet myself enough with the Tea Touch work to go into that alpha theta state. And from the animal communication work, then I lost my grandmother, my father passed away, and they started to come to me, and the same thing. I kind of pushed it away, and then I thought, well, this isn't any different than talking with animals. Um, so I opened myself up to the intuitive work with people who are living and had crossed over. And somewhere, I don't know, 2007-ish, 2008, I got certified as a life coach, and I've been a certified coach, professional life coach since 2008. And then I've been trained in animal hospice, and that's a passion of mine. We're either passionate about life or death or both, and I'm passionate about both. And the hospice work is something that I teach, and I am passionate about with the animals. And I also then went through training for hospice for people, for death doula training for people. And so that's the evolution. It began with a puppy, and that was Java.
Little did you know.
Right, right. And then from that puppy, it just kind of it has evolved, and you know, I've written a few books, and I've got a CD out, or a recording out, and I've just it's been fun to just see how the world wants to evolve me. Like, what is the planet wanting of me? What are the gifts that our God, Great Spirit is asking of me, rather than what am I wanting to do? Because I feel like my path has been such a humble, like, how can I best be served on the planet? How can I best serve others? Rather than here's what I want to do. Because there is this, uh, Lao Tzu says, rushing into action we fail, trying to grasp things we lose them. Therefore, the master takes action by holding still. And that's what I've done, is I've held still to that place of quieting the mind and opening the heart, and that's where all of this has come from. The shamanic work, I didn't even know what shamanic work was. I just found myself on the heels of a car accident, and I opened a magazine and found my way to somebody that taught me. And when I began the shamanic work, my body said, "You've been here before. This is familiar." And so, really, it's just us opening ourselves to that universal life force energy that's flowing through, and um, being willing to change paths and not be attached to a specific outcome. That when I started teaching in the public schools, I knew after a year or two that that wasn't going to be my life's work. But I didn't know what my life's work was going to be until the puppy showed up. And then once the puppy came, I knew that I was going to be working with animals. I didn't know how, but I knew that that's what I was going to be doing for my this next phase for the last 20 some years.
That's
And I'm
really
still evolving.
powerful. Yeah,
Still.
I mean, amazing, right? But and playful. It's like I feel like in many ways the reason that we seek company with animals is the same reason so many of us want to have kiddos, is because it gives us permission to be all of ourselves again and not to turn back on that inner channel that delights and that is eh, humble and open enough to delight in public. Well, to not be so serious all the time and so so focused. I guess that's feeling like giving yourself permission, those of you who are listening or who are watching, and because it is easy to get a little wooed out. It is easy to get, and or on the flip side, I mean, I've met so many people along my journey who are taking courses and reading books and trying to learn how to tune in reliably, to be of service in at the charity or the animal shelter they work at, or to help their own animals get along. I mean, you don't have to have a reason. You don't have to have, it's like some big massive calling, um, it's a call to experience the fullness of what it means to be alive. That is pretty humbling to realize when we start communicating with animals. It can be very humbling because we realize how little our heads know of even ourselves, of the world, of what's going on all around us, and we want to be dealt back in. We want to join the conversation that's been going on around, and just kind of realize, man, it's been going on around me all my life, and I'm just now starting to realize, and so I really want to encourage those of you who are listening to Sage today, or listening to us have our conversation, that you don't have to have a reason. You don't. Let's not be too terribly adult about this. Um, it's a place to that doesn't really actually work, and that's a whole separate conversation. That would be something I like to speak about in when I'm offering workshops or courses or things like that. But it's about giving yourself permission to just see what's possible, to play, to have fun, to become more aware. One of my teachers, Sonia Choquette, talks a lot about her mentors and the greats that she looks up to, and she talks about uh, the painter Da Vinci and how he used to send his painting students out to just sit in a field or in a cluster of shops or just some random place and just spend all day sitting there noticing things.
Mhm.
It's like so that the beagle doesn't have to yell,
Right.
right? To be heard, that you could start, just start to, you don't have to do anything big. I love that those of you who are listening or watching today's podcast, this is enough. If
Right.
you resonate, there's something there. Let's have that be our big takeaway today. If you resonate with anything that you've heard today, or you have anything in you that says, I've had an experience like that, I think maybe or I've heard bumps in the night or voices, or I've thought I've heard my animal who's passed calling to me, or, tap, tap, tapping down the hall. Um, what if we just say yes to those experiences and we just open a little bit more, just a little bit, and just see what's possible? The thing that I love, and of course this is always how I kind of like to close out each connection on Let's Talk to Animals. Two things. One, I like to share, ask you to share, a little bit about how it's changed your life. And you've already shared a lot about that. And then also, of course, how people can reach you. I'll just share how it's changed my life. It's made me realize I didn't really know myself until I was able to reconnect to the greater whole, the whales and the singing cockatiels and the turtles and the dachshunds careening around the house, and the kitties running by the window, and all the different things that are going on. I found myself in a new way that I feel like I can finally trust, that there's a place for me in the world. There's a need for me. And I love how you talked so beautifully about humbly seeking, where can I be of service? How can I help? I really send me. I want to help. I want to be involved. Deal me in. I want to be a part. I want to participate. If that resonates with you as you're listening or watching, maybe you'll want to reach out to Sage and schedule a session. That's the best way to experience animal communication and kind of get your woo alert brain to just pipe down already, is to just be like, dang it, this stuff, there's something to it. It works. She said that, and that's exactly how my animal is. I have lots of free tools on my website, animallovelanguages.com. It says learn with me. You can find free camps, free workshops to tune in. Sage, share a little bit, if you will, about how people can reach out to you and work with you, or you've mentioned books. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and how the animals have been sharing through you.
Sure. Sure. Well, my website is dancingporcupine.com.
I love
And that's
that.
the
Love
name
it.
of my business is Dancing Porcupine. And that's the simplest way to find me. But if you don't have the internet, or for some reason it's not working, I have a phone number, and my phone number is 612-817-4473. And I offer sessions for both people and animals. The first 10 minutes are always free for new clients. And I also teach a variety of different classes. I've got a Tellington Tea Touch for Aging and End of Life course coming up on March 19th. And I'm also on the 20th, I'm doing a spring equinox shamanic smudge online. Let's see what happens. Uh,
Beautiful.
Hang the drum and journey a bit. So that's on March 20th. And then I'll be teaching Tellington Tea Touch for people sometime in the spring, and also leading a Southwest Spiritual Adventure trip. So I lead adventure trips. I'm doing that the end of May around the Arizona area. So we'll be looking at different sacred sites. And I've got one spot remaining. So I wasn't going to mention that, but I have
Ooh.
one spot for one woman, because there's 5 other women going. And then I'm leading a trip to the Amazon jungle next May. It'll be my 4th trip leading.
Wow.
And if anybody's interested in that, you can find me at dancingporcupine.com.
You are the coolest. Amazon is totally on my bucket list. I will have to check that out. Yeah, for obvious feathery and shelled reasons, right? So it's my goodness. Yeah. So please, if you're listening, if you're watching, dancingporcupine.com. And of course, Sage offered her number, and I'll put that in the show notes. So you can reach out whenever it feels right for you. You can reach me and Pearl and Malty at animallovelanguages.com. Please bookmark us if you enjoyed this episode on YouTube or in your favorite streaming podcast service. Please do leave us a 5-star review. We love the 6 stars if it's available. Infinite stars, Pearl suggests. A review, any questions, any requests for future guests. Love to hear from you, and it sure does make our day. To connect with you and know that we are developing and growing our community here together. Sage, thank you again for being willing
Yeah,
to
Shannon,
be a
thank
part.
you.
It's
Thank
so lovely to meet you, and look forward to being in touch and staying in touch in this
That sounds
wonderful work we share. Okay,
much.
bye for now.